Hello, Internet Infantry, and welcome to this. This is a Kocosports.net presents MMA AM. It's half morning show, half MMA show, pretty much all bullshit. I'm LK from Kocosports.net, and I'm joined by Sean. Where is it exactly? Because I got on your Twitter, it's a very different thing from what I was expecting. If I'm correct, when I get the actual thing up, I put you down from a fantasy sports site, if I'm correct.
Correct. I write for dailyfantasysportsrankings.com, DFSR.com. That's actually pittered out a little bit recently, but I write for them, and I also am on the MMA Edge fantasy MMA podcast.
Okay, so that's cool. That's where they can find you. Welcome to the show. And what were your overall thoughts on the UFC Fight Night 104 Burmudez versus Korean Zombie?
It was an okay card. At least personally for me, the beginning of the card, picks wise, went great up until we got to the main card, and then everything just fell apart. A lot of things I didn't expect, which we'll get to. It was a solid card. I like Korean Zombie as a fan, so it was nice to see him come back and succeed. I didn't pick him, so he blew up my bets in my DraftKings teams. But it's one of those things where once I saw how he looked, and obviously the fight didn't last long, but pretty early, I realized I was going to lose some money. But good card. Not great for me bet-wise, but look to get back on it, especially with the first pay-per-view of the year coming up. So we're kind of trending in the right direction because the card a few weeks ago was real bad. This one was better, but not great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was worth. And again, as people have known, this is only my third real full UFC fight card. I got UFC Fight Pass. Now, do you own the Fight Pass? Because lots of people online are bashing it, and I have no idea why.
I love Fight Pass. It's what I use to research. I do tape study on all the upcoming fights. I was on it for 3 hours today. I was going through and I was finding old Jermaine Durandamy fights. The Holly Holm fights are easy enough to find, but it lets me find a lot of the undercard fighters. Especially, they do a good job, at least in my experience, of if somebody has a fight coming up, you can usually find their last few fights on there. It's a little hard with the regional guys, but they don't own the rights to all those fights. I like Fight Pass. Some of the functionality is a little funky, so I get why people maybe have problems with it. But once you get the hang of it, it's a really great, useful tool, at least for me.
I really like the mobile app. I think they got a really good mobile app. Like you said,
Yep.
obviously new to it, so I kind of like going through different fighters. And I really want to watch Ultimate Fight. Is there a season in particular that you would recommend? Because I really want to watch a series of it.
Oddly enough, one of these seasons I enjoy. I can give you a lot of the American ones. I guess I enjoyed the ATT Black Zillions season. At least I like the coaches going back and forth. It's especially interesting because the Black Zillions are going through their big breakup. So that's the American version. And then Tough Brazil, I think it was 3. The season with Chael Sonnen and Vanderlei Silva. Even though they never fought, I love Chael Sonnen. I love to listen to him talk. That was a really entertaining season. And it has guys who are in the UFC now. It has Antonio Carlos Jr., Cardi Zapato, Rogerio de Lima, who just fought. There's some UFC caliber fighters on that season, and it's a season you can only find on Fight Pass. I believe it was Tough Brazil 3.
Okay, thank you. What I like is you actually get so many different, promotions on there. Like there was a Titan FC. I watched the main event with Torres the other week. He's a great fighter. Yep. But it was kind of like when I was looking at, because obviously you can see the card, when I was looking at the Invictors and the Titans, you can't actually click on these fighters. And it's like, okay, I want to get to know them, blah, 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 but I just can't click. Is it only the UFC fighters contracted that can be on that site, as in have a profile?
I believe so. As far as I understand it is. I usually, just because you have time constraints, I'm usually only looking for people who are UFC guys, and occasionally I'll jump on and look for Invicta fighters, but the Invicta website's pretty good for that. That's really the biggest benefit, other than tape study, I have for UFC Fight Pass. I love the Invicta cards. If you're new to MMA and you're really just watching UFC right now, you could watch Bellator. Some of it's okay, but Invicta is great. The level of women's MMA is really coming up. Invicta, I love watching their cards. I'm on there. I'm always watching them live.
That's an interesting point, because we talked about this on I think it was either Friday's or Saturday's edition of MMA AM. I was talking about how I seem to enjoy the women's fighting a lot more than men. And, the women had the fight of the night, in my opinion, on this show with Andrade and Hill.
That's crazy.
Why is it? It was a crazy fight. Was it? Why do you think that women's fighting, I don't know if it's for you or for me, I find women's fighting a lot more entertaining than men's fighting?
It depends on the fight. It's usually the women are much more technical. And when you talk about women's MMA, you have to walk a fine line of not being sexist, but being reasonable in that there's not as much power, so the fights tend to go longer. It's not a sexist thing; it's just how it is. You're not going to get as many knockouts unless you're talking about a Justine Cyborg. But for the most part, they're more technical fights, so that leads to more entertaining fights. They tend to go the whole way. That's really at the top level, though. Women's MMA, for as great as it is at the top level compared to where it was years ago, it's a whole different conversation. But it's why Ronda Rousey was so dominant. Is that the world of female mixed martial arts hadn't caught up to where she was yet. Now, when you have a champion like that, everyone kind of catches up, and so the top is really there's just better fighters now, more technical, and because it's a little new, I think it's more entertaining.
Okay, because it's still new. Because I think I watched like a mini documentary on the Fight Pass. I think it's only been around for 4 years. Women's MMA only been around 4 years, or is that just in the UFC?
Just in the UFC, I think that's when they started their bantamweight division. The strawweight division started 2 years ago. I want to say maybe last year. And they're just obviously the next card coming up is the Home Durandamy fight for the inaugural featherweight title. And again, another side conversation. They shouldn't start that division. That division is going to be a cluster for a while. They should have started the women's 125-pound division because there's a lot of women in limbo right now who have a real hard time making 115 and are just undersized at 135. And the UFC doesn't have a flyweight division. So they should have started that division. They didn't. Instead, they started this division at featherweight 145 for Cyborg, and now she's not even on it. She got popped for steroids or some banned substance. And she complaining about the weight cut she was doing, and she had a hard time getting down to 135 or even her 140 catch weight. So they started this division for her, and now she can't compete in it. And it's a barren wasteland. Whereas they had a lot of talent for 125.
Yeah, because Beck Rawlings, wasn't it, on this card? She didn't make the weight because she had some disease she announced on Instagram. It's like
right.
She could have easily gone up to 125. I do agree with you, but I didn't see the point of adding too many divisions. I think they love having new champions. I think they're like pro wrestling in that terms. They're like, oh, history draws. Like, oh, come watch the first ever, champion in that division.
Speaking of they're handing out interim belts like they're just candy. Everyone's an interim champion. It's crazy, but it's one of those things where the UFC. You gotta remember they just got sold or were bought for I think it was $4 billion. They got to make money, and what sells? Championships sell pay-per-views and money, and that's kind of my theory and why there's so many interim belts right now. And for the most part, unless you're, an avid fight fan, it's what do you care? Okay, I'm going to watch this card to watch a champion get crowned. If you watch it a bunch, it's irritating, but you're still going to buy the fights and watch them for the most part. They're handing out golds all over the place.
Now, Americans, I guess the UFC pay-per-views are the exact same price of the wrestling pay-per-views, around about $55 to $65.
Yep,
is that correct?
Yeah, they're 60 usually.
Bloody hell! In the UK anyway, we get the Fight Pass, so we get the early prelims and the prelims that aired on Fox Sports. And to watch BT Sport, it's only £20 a month, which is equivalent to about $15. That's pay-per-views, fight nights, on Fox shows, all of them completely free on BT Sport. We've got a really great deal over there compared to you. So we can watch 3 months worth of pay-per-views for your 1 month of pay-per-view buy. It's incredible.
I didn't know that actually. It made me a little angry, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, but BT Sport, you still have to pay on top of you have to pay the sports subscription pass on your Sky. So you still do pay for it, but if you've already got the Sky, you may as well just pop on the extra £20 for the UFC. But then we'll get to Fight Night 104 Bermudez, Korean Zombie. Khalil Roundtree defeated Daniel Jolly, light heavyweight division, with a straight 2 disgraceful knees to the head to stop the fight. Great fight, very short, sweet, great way to open the show. And I loved how he just came out and he says, you know what? I'm here, I'm going to go home and I'm going to train. Who have you got next to fight me? What were your thoughts on Khalil Roundtree?
My first initial thought before the fight was announced is, when the fight was announced, is I can't believe he's getting another shot. He only didn't get his walking papers from the UFC because he was on Tough and he was a great character. He looked awful in his UFC fights, just didn't know what to do on the ground. Granted, he's got great power, but it was his personality and his look that got him this opportunity. And all credit to him. I like him. Daniel Jolly went out and did exactly what you thought the game plan against Roundtree would and should be until he proves he can defend a takedown. He shot a takedown. It was a terrible takedown attempt, and Roundtree timed knees and put him out with his vicious power. So it was a good game plan by Jolly, terribly executed, and props to Roundtree. I'll be interested to see in his next fight exactly where his takedown defense is. Granted, it's definitely better than nothing, but that was a bad shot. It was a couple bad takedown attempts that led to the knockout, but good for Roundtree. Fun way to start the card. Definitely enjoyed it.
How many more fights do you reckon to do you reckon, because it was the knee to the head, so you could call it kind of like a fluke, but obviously he still did the knee to the head. Do you reckon he'll have one more fight, and do you reckon he'll get beaten once again, or do you think, what, maybe he has improved since then, and he will be, a potential top 15 rank?
I want to see the matchup. It'd be interesting to put him against another pure striker, because there are plenty of them out there, guys, who excel in striking, and see what he does. I don't, again, just because of who he is, he's got that kind of it factor that they want to build and make money on. I think as long as he doesn't go out and crap the bed, he'll be fine. And even if he loses, he'll get one more fight. Generally in the UFC, you need to lose back-to-back fights to get your walking papers. It'll be the matchup. I think if he gets I want to see a striker versus striker matchup. I think if he goes out there against a pure grappler, he'll be in trouble, because I don't know how much better your takedown defense can get in that short amount of time. So we'll see what happens, but he's just got crazy power, which is fun for fight fans.
Yeah, I enjoyed the fight. Great way to kick the fight off. Then we had Nico Price versus Alex Morono in the welterweight division. Price won by knockout. Last 10 seconds, Price just annihilated him. And then post-match, he just goes on to say, look, call me and I'll knock them out. Again, similarities to pro wrestling. It was really, look, okay, they've all got different characters, and it's all a work somehow. I like this Price guy. I said yesterday that I didn't like him, but that made me realize that means he's actually really good at his job. He's being an arrogant prick, saying, whoever you are, come here and I'll fucking fuck you up. I really enjoy it. And do you see him as a threat? Or do you see him as he's just because he is undefeated right now. He's 10-0 with a good record. Right. But is that just because he's been against not the best caliber of fighters?
His last 2 wins are impressive. He's up and coming prospect. You really can never peg someone this early in their career, because they have to just keep growing. But he's looked really good. The win against Brandon Thatch immediately made me dislike him a lot, because he cost me, again, a lot of money on DraftKings when he subbed Thatch, whose takedown defenses or ground game sub defenses equivalent to, I don't know, pick anybody off the street, and that's his ground game. Brandon Thatch, you know what? I have to look and see if he got released after that. I think it was his 4th straight loss. Nico Price made him look bad, and then got his brown belt in the cage. And I like his persona. And this fight against Morono, he was getting his ass kicked for the first round and a half. And it was because he was, in his whole career, he's been aggressive. He started to sit back, try and get Morono's timing, which maybe helped in the long run, but he was looking to counter. And you hear his corner yelling. I loved his corner men say, be aggressive, go first. And all of a sudden he did. And he started to land first and tag Morono. And then that knockout, as the end of the second round horn went off, he landed a vicious shot to the temple, put down Morono by knockout. And a lot of the stuff afterwards I find interesting, especially in fights like that. You gotta remember, these guys are talking after being in a war and, eating punches, kicks. Like, they're not right. So it's interesting to see what they say on the mic. Some guys are really good at it. Sam Alvey had one couple fights ago where he basically just rambled for 90 seconds, and it was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. He was just cabbage, dump truck, coffee can, just spewing words out of his mouth because he'd been punched in the head for 10 minutes. So I like Nico Price. Good win. I think he's going to get I don't want to say a top 15 guy next, but somebody just outside of there, because he's looked really good. I think if he wins his next fight, he'll get a top 15 matchup. And is one of those guys who I think is going to benefit from his personality.
Yeah, if it was the top 15, maybe Kamaru Usman. Maybe it could be a potential, ranked 14. I think that could be potentially an interesting fight.
Yeah, you know what? That's not bad. I do like Kamaru. That's a good stylistic matchup. That's a good piece of matchmaking. I'd watch that.
Not see, not too grad for a green ass goose shit.
Yeah, that was good.
Then we have now. I don't know if the commentators got this right or not. We have Ricardo Ranos or Hanos.
I think it's
why is there an R in
Hanos.
his?
Yeah.
Why is there an R in his name if they pronounce it H?
It's like the Japanese guy in a fight I watched recently where Tanaka, but his name is pronounced Hanaka, or some that might have been.
Yeah, it
Was
was
that his
on this
opponent on
show.
this one? Yeah, that exactly. And there were names like that, and it was just like, what are we doing? And stuff like that. I tend to go and watch. I fact check myself on John Anik and these UFC guys. So if they're saying it that way, that's how I'm going to say it. But who knows?
It just confused me because I've got it written down and I have like next to it -H because like what the fuck went on? It did go the full distance. I gave the score 29-28 to Tanaka, or however you fuck they say this guy's name. The winner though was Honmus. It was a debut for him. I think he was found on the UFC show that Dana White has.
Right, that was the
if I'm
looking for a
correct.
fight. He's the guy they went out and saw twice. Dana White went to see him, and he fucking lost. You can't sign him then. So Dana White then did another episode a season later, went out, saw him, got a win, and then signed him and had this fight. I actually had a 29-28 for him. It's that second round was close. I just thought he did a little more damage. I tend to look at damage and pressure. I had a 29-28 Ramos, but if you would have told me you scored it the other way, it's one of those I really can't get on you for it. It was a close fight. I think I actually tweeted right at the end of that fight that it had split decision written all over it. It was a close fight.
It was still enjoyable. I kind of like those close fights where you kind of don't really know who gets to win, and as long as the judges don't, completely fuck it up, I don't mind. But
who knows?
With the judges, like sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. Why is that? Does a different state have a different judge, or is there just UFC there? I think they would benefit if they just had 3 like mixed martial arts legends. Okay, they pay 3 mixed martial arts legends to just be the judges.
Well, the judges
time, everywhere.
The judges are hired by the commissions who are in each state, just like the referees. It's the same kind of sanctioning body. That's why you see Herb Dean everywhere, though. He's sanctioned everywhere. And there's judges who are sanctioned everywhere, like all the names are escaping me now, but Bruce Buffer will say names. This bout is going to be judged by these 3 people, and it's the same names, like you recognize them. The reason why judging gets so out of whack is sometimes they don't know what the fuck they're doing or looking at. They're just lack of knowledge. That's not as often as fans probably want to think, but it happens. It's more likely that you remember they're watching different angles than you are. They're not getting replay. They're not having Brian Stan tell you, oh, he connected on that right hand. He landed the counter there. They might not see the counter shot. They can score takedowns, aggression differently. So it's a little bit of just what they're actually seeing. They don't have any help from announcers, and a little bit of just how, what they value. There does need to, I don't like the 10-point must system in general. It's one of the carryovers from boxing MMA is used that I don't like. And I think that's where the fundamental flaw in judging fights come from. Less from the judges, more from let's use this 10-point must system.
But I think it's because they do that. It's quite easy to play along, and I think it's quite fun to play along when you sat there and you take. It's like for me the fight from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. That's how long the show was. So I always take notes everything I do, whether it's wrestling or MMA or whatever. So it's kind of nice to play along because otherwise I wouldn't know what to write. So it's kind of interesting to play along with.
Yeah, but I have a problem with it just because you can get somebody in the first round who just gets the ever living shit beat out of them, but survives. And okay, they're down 10-8. They got destroyed in the first round. They got knocked down twice. They should have been stopped. And in rounds 2 and 3, he recovers and just stays away, outpoints, very boring, low output fight. And say a judge gives him both of those really close rounds. Well, now you got a draw. How the fuck did that happen? Yeah, 28-28 draw, and this guy almost died in the first round and just kind of, stayed away and won on points in rounds 2 and 3. I think it works better. I don't know exactly what the solution is because the scoring system is what fans understand. My initial thought is just who won the fight, Judge Sean I have scored the fight for Ramos. Period. I just don't like the 10-point must system.
Maybe if they did it with, maybe if they did it without the 8, if it's just 10-9, 10-9, 10-9. So he won round 1, he won round 2, he won round 3, and then whoever wins the most wins instead of this 8, because you can get the element of a draw, which no one really wants to see ever.
Right, but again, it's the same problem. You're equating the same ass kicking to a barely outpointing somebody. There's a lot of conversation around it, a lot of different ways to look at it. There's just something needs to be done. I don't profess to have all the answers. It's an imperfect system right now.
I don't think anything ever will be done, because as long as I can remember, they've done it like this. And boxing, like you said, that boxing's always been like it, but who knows? And then we had Chris Skelly versus Chris Gritsmocker in the lightweight division. Skelly got the win with a rear naked choke in the second round. Post-match, Skelly put over his team, and basically he just begged to fight on the May 13th event.
Yep, he wants to stay. He wants to stay on that card. Or get on that card. What I took from that fight is Grits is still very, very tough. I actually picked Gritsmocker just because I liked his toughness. I just thought it was a closer fight than what the odds told me. But Chas Skelly proved me really, really wrong. The X factor in this fight to me was, I said earlier, I really like the quarterman of Nico Price. I can't remember the team that Gritsmocker went to. He left ATT. He was on that season of tough ATT versus Black Zillions, and he left ATT and went to a new camp. And those guys suck. They were just yelling. He was getting his ass kicked. You're doing fine, great, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Give him some kind of instructional advice. His quartermen were terrible. And he ended up getting tapped out, rear naked choke. Chas Skelly just overwhelmed him, wrestled him, controlled him on the ground. Grits is super tough, fought off the choke for a while. That's really his best asset is his toughness, and that's not usually a good thing. It needs to be something you have in your tool belt, but when it's your best asset, you're kind of screwed. And that's what happened.
Do you see Skelly being, he's now 17 for 2. Do you see him potentially being a top 15 contender in the lightweight division?
He should get that division is stacked. That division is loaded. But yeah, I'd give him a shot up there for sure. I think he's done enough to get one of those guys in the bottom half of the top 15. He's even, he needs to get himself. It's sad, but on the personality map for the casual fan, he's somebody the hardcore fans know a little more. I think if you were to put him on one of the fight pass only cards, you could probably put him as the co-main event against a top 15 lightweight. I'd watch that. He's on the rise. He's the guy. I'm still not totally sold on him, but he keeps proving me wrong. So give him a shot. Sure.
Why not? And then we had Curtis Blades versus Adam Milstead, heavyweight division. This was not nice. No. Blades won due to doctor and referee and everyone's stoppage.
Thank Christ. That went on too long.
That should have been like when it first happened. You saw how he went down, and the commentators there, John Anik, or I think that's his name, is screaming like this fight needs to be over. Like the corner shouldn't send him back out for the second round. I'm thinking, okay, that's over. I can go make myself a cup of tea. So I was like, okay, I'll go take the Fight Pass app with me because we're still on the prelims. So I took the app with me, made myself a tea, and then I heard the bell, the fight start round two. I'm like, what are you actually fucking kidding? They're continuing, and then he does exactly the same thing. So his leg goes that way and that way. And it was absolutely cringy. And they kept showing it on slow-mo after slow-mo after different angle. And it's like you don't want to watch, but you have to watch kind of thing.
Yep. It was equivalent to watching Anderson Silva's leg break against Chris Weidman's shin. Just over and over again. Please stop showing it, please. That fight needed to be stopped right away. It wasn't. And then his quarterman letting him go out. He posted something on Twitter saying, I didn't let my cornermen know they weren't going to stop me. I wanted to go out on my shield, which good for him. He probably gained some fans just in toughness. Because if anyone, by the way, seen Adam Milstead's knees, please, his knee, ACL, MCL, go ahead and mail it back to him because I'm pretty sure it's still in Houston. That's one of the uglier things I've seen in MMA outside of the Anderson Silva leg break. It was just one of those. As soon as it happened, you knew it. It needed to be stopped. He was just trying to get up from a takedown, and Curtis Blades, who's a heavyweight, obviously, just put all his weight on him. You try and get up on one leg with a heavyweight on top of you. Unless you have crazy strong legs, something's going to break. and his shit broke. Blades looked really impressive. I like him a lot. Especially if you can grapple well at the heavyweight division, there's not a ton of those guys out there. So they're fun to watch, and they present a different challenge than a lot of those guys at that weight class are used to. He's not a top 15 guy yet, or is he? The problem with heavyweight,
No, he's not top 15 yet.
He's going to be soon, though, because the problem with heavyweight is outside the top 10, there's a bunch of dog shit out there. And that's in the UFC. Go outside of the UFC promotion, the heavyweights are just atrocious. There's just not too many guys fighting at that weight. So he'll be up there soon. He'll get a shot against somebody whose name you know soon. You know, I'm thinking about it, maybe Andrei Arlovsky, if he's woken up from the Ngannou devastating knockout. That'd be a good matchup.
I think they could do, because obviously Ngannou knocked out Curtis Blades a few months ago. Right. Why don't do that as a rematch? Say, look, Curtis Blades, he went back, he retrained, now he wants the rematch. He wants to see if he can knock Ngannou out. Because I don't think, like, lots of people think, like, oh, go for Ngannou top 5, see if he can swim with the sharks. But this guy is a star. Like, everywhere it's all Ngannou. Protect that star. You know, you could say to him, look, do you think you could beat Curtis Blades? And if he doesn't, it's only one defeat. And like you said, the heavyweight division is just bullshit anyway. And if Blades does defeat Ngannou, you now have Blades move up into the top 10, top 15, and now you've got another star because he's the one who beat Ngannou. And then maybe you could do a rubber match. Who can win, Ngannou or Blades? They're all one apiece. You know, winner gets top 5.
I don't think Blades is there. I think Blades is going to need one more. I think that's a matchup that could happen if Ngannou's got to go up. It's just one of those, because they need people up there, he's going to fight a JDS or somebody whose name you know. And he's earned it. He's looked that good. He's fun for me to watch, too. I mentioned it on the Loudmouth MMA podcast, actually. The last time or 2 fights ago, he won by Kimura and basically told, I think it was Brian Stan who was interviewing him, hey, yeah, they just taught me that in the back. And I was like, oh, this is way easier than knocking somebody out. I could just rip his arm off. Sweet. And he went out and he did it. He learned it in the back and pulled it off. He's just one of those freaks in nature. He's due to fight a top 5 guy. And if he wins that, heavyweight's so shallow and Kane's on the shelf, he could get a title shot. He could be potentially, because of his star power, for pay-per-view sales, one fight away from a title shot. I think if he loses that top 5 matchup and Curtis Blades goes out and beats somebody in the top 15, then maybe that scenario you just set out would play a little better. But I think they need Ngannou bad enough up at the top that's what's going to happen.
So who in the top 5 do you reckon he will fight next?
Top 5.
I'd like to see Kane. I want to see Cain Velasquez.
Well, I think Kane's on the shelf with that surgery, the back surgery.
Are you sure?
Now I'm doubting myself, but how long ago was that? I just had a baby, so my whole timeline on life is just really.
His last fight was at UFC 200 with Travis Brown.
Right, and he had that fight where he was going to fight the rematch with Verdum, and they wouldn't let him fight because he had an interview that he couldn't stand up for 15 minutes without being in agony, and the commission pulled him from the card. I don't know if he's available. I would watch that fight. The fight that keeps jumping to my mind, I would like to see Junior Dos Santos and Ngannou. That's the fight I want to see.
Either way, I hope he wins because I think he could be a great champion. I think he really could, because that's a star power. The guy went from nothing to a star in 2 fights. Unbelievable.
The UFC needs him too. They need another heavyweight bad.
Agreed. And then we went to the main card, Jessica Andrade versus Angela Hill. Just 3 rounds of brutality. Even if you're not a hardcore MMA fan and you're not even a casual MMA fan, you don't even like MMA, you could stick that on and you will be absolutely glued to the TV because it was fucking incredible and the best fight I've ever watched from a 2-week experience.
Poor Angela Hill. She was on the season of Tough to crown the inaugural strawweight champion, and she was the 16 seed, lost to Carla Esparza, who went on to win the show and be the first strawweight champion. But she looked okay in that fight. She looked good. Got her shot in the UFC, didn't work out for her, a couple tough losses, and went to Invicta and became their strawweight champion and looked really good. She made big improvements in her game. I was looking forward to her UFC debut or her re-debut because she had added tools. She clearly had her confidence back, having dominated in Invicta. and she got thrown to the fucking wolves. Like, she wanted her chance, and she got it. You mean short notice fight she wanted to take, and then commission again wouldn't let it happen, so it got scheduled, and she just took a beating. I want to see her fight someone not in the top 5, because Andrade is going to do that to a lot of people in that division. She is going to hurt people. So Angela Hill really needs a shot, and she's going to get it. They're not going to cut her after that. Because Jessica Andrade also, she's one of those who she fought at 135 for a little while. It didn't work out for her, and she got some body, some muscle mass down, and makes a hard cut down to 115. She's one of those. I think if the UFC had a flyweight women's division, she'd be the champion. I would start off with her and either give her the belt or have a title shot for her, because that's really, I think, her natural division. But if she can keep making 115, watch out, JJ. I think that is the biggest threat to Joanna Champion.
I really did enjoy the fight, and in wrestling, again, it's usually like you can win. You could win in defeat, and I think because that fight is so good, people want to see more of her.
Yes.
So I think you get chuck her again in a fair fight, like not a top 5. You know, Alexa Grasso, who lost, if I'm correct, she lost to Herrick. She lost to Herrick, so she'll probably move down the rankings to like maybe 14. Grasso and Hill, same time in between fights, on the same fight card, so all the fans who watch that show will know who both those ladies are. Put them on, and that's a fairer fight.
That's one if you want. I mean, that's some good names. I think if you want to build up a little bit, you give Hill someone out of the top 15. When I was first thinking about matchups, the name that jumped out to me was Valerie Letourneau, who might be right at the edge of the top 15. But I would go down. Grasso's coming off a loss. I wouldn't want to match those two up as they just both come off a loss, and you got two young prospects, both off of losses. One's going to have 2 in a row, and you're really going to be in some shit. So I wouldn't put them against each other. It's a fight down the road that'd be interesting. And now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it out loud, maybe I wouldn't even give Hill Letourneau, because she's still a solid fighter. I would try and find Hill a cupcake. I would try and find her a can and let her get a win. She deserved that after the beating she took. She made you some money. Get her confidence up, because I think she's a real prospect in that division. I don't think she's a potential top 5, top 10 down the road, but she can have some longevity and success at the 115 UFC division.
Well, with fights like that, there's gonna be a star anyway. And then we had Anthony Hamilton versus Marcel Fortuna in the amazing heavyweight division. Fortuna.
I'm trying not to get pissed off just hearing you talk about this fight. I don't want to talk about this. I can speak for a lot of people on DraftKings and betting. What the fuck was I thinking picking Anthony Hamilton? Are you serious? He looked, and I knew it. I knew he was a terrible fighter, and I got so hung up. And now he's fighting a guy who's not even big for light heavyweight, which is where he's fought. Fortuna is barely a light heavyweight fighter. He's up fighting at heavyweight. I'm just thinking, okay, the size is going to be too much. It's just, and he was a chalk play. And what the fuck? I will never pick Anthony Hamilton again. I am still tilted about it. That was an awful performance. It was just terrible. And this is just, and you can't even talk about the clash of heads where his eye or that cut looked brutal. Thank God I didn't get all the way to the corner, because they might have. It's hard to get a stop fight for a cut in MMA, especially recently. That bordered on it. That was nasty looking after that clash.
Agree. But sorry to cut off there. Fortuna just got the win with a huge right hand, and it was. I don't like laughing at pain, and I don't, because obviously I respect the fact they're going in there. But I found it fairly amusing when Hamilton just dumped on his head and tried to run up the cage. His legs couldn't get him out. I thought that was kind of amusing. It
was funny if I wouldn't have just lost so much friggin' money.
And then we went to a light heavyweight action with OSP versus Volkan Ozdemir. I was very, very, very disappointed with OSP.
Yep. I don't think his heart's in it. It was one of those, again, I heard somebody mention it, talking about it, and I just thought he has more on paper. He's at a higher class. He just should have been the better all-around fighter. And he didn't look there. Maybe that ass kicking that John Jones gave him it happens to fighters. You take enough damage, you're going to start wearing it, and that's kind of what looked like happened. He just didn't look like the same OSP. He's watched a bunch of fights in a row now. He's in trouble. He's one of those guys who you might not see in the UFC again. You might see him in Bellator next. I don't know how many fights are left on his deal or if it'll matter, but he's looked real, real bad. And again, I picked him just because on paper he should have been the better fighter, and he wasn't. And you could get all technical with it. I just don't think his heart was there. No heart.
It was kind of like the crowd obviously booing. It was following, the Andrade and Hill and the knockout in the first round. So the crowd are going to be now anticipating great fights, which wasn't really fair. But
it wasn't a good fight.
It was just 3 rounds. It was 3 rounds, and for the first time, I felt bored. Getting quite bored.
It'll happen, especially with the heavier weight classes. Almost a heavyweight, but that's light heavyweight. I mean, speaking of Fight Pass, you want to be bored, go watch the Shamil Abdurakhimov fight. Fucking up his name. But he was the guy who just made Derek Lewis look bad. One of those you get guys who stall and clinch and wrestle, especially when the heavier guys get gassed out. They're just kind of in there. You'll get more of that as you watch more and more. And it was a bad fight to begin with, and coming off the last fight, it looked fucking terrible.
Not very enjoyable for me to watch.
Yeah.
Then we had Abel Trujillo versus James Vick in a lightweight action. Vick won in submission in round 3. Vick post-match wanted to be on the Dallas card again, May 13th. I enjoyed it, but again, I don't know if you had this problem. I was just coming off the Hill match, coming up with the knockout. These 2 matches in a row, they both went the distance, just bored me. The only 2 fights in the whole card, they bored me.
This is one of those cases that I like to think of, and I saw this being a boring fight. I picked Trujillo. I wasn't confident. It was a razor thin fight. I believe the odds were that way. I think they were both minus 110. They were 8,100 apiece on DraftKings. It was a close fight. Hard to separate them, and it became one of those. They're both good fighters. I know Trujillo didn't look great, but as you get in the higher levels of MMA and the fights get more technical and guys don't want to take that many chances and they have more respect for the opposition, you can get some of these lower output, boring fights. That's why a lot of the times the fights on Fight Pass and early in the prelims are great fights. It's usually because one fighter is way better than the other and somebody gets the shit kicked out of them. And that's why you like watching. That's why we watch fights. This was more technical. Vic looked good. I was impressed with him. Didn't take a ton of damage. He could be on that card. Again, it was not a fight I'm going to sit here and rave about. Vic looked good. Trujillo didn't look great. You'll see them both again. I don't think anybody's going to make big strides off that fight. Good performance. Controlled Trujillo. Really, Trujillo never had him in any kind of trouble. Yeah, again, it was one of those where I could definitely see how it was a 2-fight lag for you coming off that Hill Andrade fight. That Hill Andrade fight is going to be a contender for fight of the year. We had a little bit of a hangover. It was a closer fight. Luckily, we got some fireworks, towards the end of the night. Again, just an okay fight.
Speaking of okay, now this was one I was really excited for because I really got into the video packages that they made before the Alexa Grasso versus Felix Herrig, because obviously it was kind of like a teacher-student kind of match. Or no, it wasn't that. It was more of, I'm a vet. If you are the next big thing, prove it. Show me, and I'll walk out of the way, and you can be the next big thing. But until you beat me, you are nothing. It went the distance. I actually got the fucking score right, 29-28 to Herrig. It was an enjoyable fight. Grasso, do you believe she'll still be in the top 15 following the defeat, as it only went to the decision, not a complete knockout?
No, she'll probably fall out, as she should. I think overall, she has more potential than Herrig. I think that might have been Herrig at her best, and looked good. More props to her. Grasso seemed, the little bit I saw, full disclosure, didn't watch all of this fight, but the little bit I saw, Grasso looked gun shy. She looked like she didn't want to pull the trigger. Whether she didn't have timing, she was afraid of Herrig countering. The fights I've seen of her before, she's more aggressive, and she lost that aggression, and it cost her the fight.
Do you see Herrig in another fight with a top 15 competitor?
I mean, I guess so. Again, she doesn't strike me as that kind of fighter. She just doesn't. but she just did it. So I guess you probably got to move her up just based numbers wise. She doesn't strike me as having that kind of talent, but she just beat Alexa Grasso, who I think was 12. So you probably have to give her that fight, unless I guess you don't have to. You could find. It's
Find her a
hard.
cupcake.
Yeah, you could find her another one. She's not super exciting to me. She just doesn't do it for me. She's an okay fighter who I think we're gonna look back and say this was the best performance of her career.
Probably. And then we had Dennis Bermudez versus Chang Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, in the main event. Round one, Jung just uppercut, knocks out Bermudez. He goes on tops, about 2 strikes to the head. The ref stops the fight. Now, I think it was yesterday's show I was talking with Dion from SOS Wrestle Talk, and we were talking about how I don't think that if that was the other way around, okay, if that was Bermudez on top of the Korean Zombie and he did the knockout, that uppercut, he did the 1-2. I think if it was Bermudez, it would have taken 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punches for the ref to stop it. Whereas with the Korean Zombie, it just took uppercut, 1, 2 stoppage. Do you agree with that or not?
No, I don't think so, because I think for referees it's more reaction based. Just you saw the way Bermudez fell 1-2. I don't think he was going to recover. I think it was a good stoppage, maybe a little on the quick side, maybe just based on pure reputation. If the referee has in his mind, okay, this is the Korean Zombie, then yes, that would have taken more. It would have taken more than that. I've heard a few people say it was a quick stoppage. I just don't think he was going to recover. At that point, it's fighter safety, and he was out of it. That was a good clean shot, good uppercut. Again, it depends on what the referee's thinking. If he's thinking this is the Korean Zombie, he's going to come back, then maybe he lets it go a little longer. If he acts on just reaction as he's trained to do, which is what I think happened, then I think he stops the fight. It's just how good is the referee in that night? So I would say no, but would it really shock me? Stuff like that happens.
Yeah, because Korean Zombie is going to be money moving forward. Because if Korean Zombie loses here, he's kind of worthless when you try and market the guy. Oh, yeah, watch the guy who came back and lost. So I kind of felt fishy. But because obviously, pro wrestling fan for over a decade and a half, it's kind of like in the back of my brain, everything is a work. Everything, like Charles Son and TOT's, oh, that's a work. That's a work. That's a work.
That's obvious. That just is what it is. Everything Chael does doesn't work.
It's just different. And thanks for coming on. Promote all the shows you do and all your sites that you participate in before we go off the air.
The MMA Edge Fantasy Podcast. I'm also going to start doing the Loudmouth MMA podcast with Kyle Steele and MMA Profit. They do previews, breakdowns of each card, focusing on MMA Profit's going to do more of the betting side. I'm going to do more of the DraftKings. They've been doing that for a little while. I was actually scheduled to start with them, and as I mentioned earlier, I had a kid, so I've been on the shelf for a little while, but should start that up this week for the upcoming UFC card in Brooklyn, a pay-per-view card that I'm looking forward to, actually, but I think more than some people are. I've heard people bashing that card. I'm looking forward to it. So you get my breakdown on that one. I think we're filming that tomorrow, I think. But that's the Loudmouth MMA podcast. And if you guys want to get me on Twitter, it's Sean Ihaz, and then on DraftKings, Cactus Jack 2, no spaces. I'll play pretty much anyone. Go ahead and hit me up. Always fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I was tempted to get to that. Does DraftKings work in the UK?
You know what? I don't know enough about it. It's one of those things I should know, but I'm here in New York, and it was a long enough struggle for us to get DraftKings to be allowed in New York. I was without it for 6-7 months, and I was going through withdrawal. I really was. I think it works in the UK. Could be wrong. But I think they have an office in London, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be silly if
they must have one if they have an office over here. There's no reason for them to have an office they're not going to use. But yeah, thanks for joining me. I've kind of got like a list of now people who I can come on, like MMA experts. So if you hardcore MMA fans, knowledgeable fans. So if there comes a time, would you be interested to come on again?
Absolutely, man. This was a lot of fun. Do it anytime.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll be back tomorrow. I have another guest tomorrow, and then on Thursday another guest, and Friday another guest. So different guests throughout the week. So look forward to that. I appreciate you coming on today, Sean. Good luck with the podcasting. See you again next week for maybe the UFC 208 breakdown. Lots of forward to. I'm going to go watch SmackDown, sadly, because I've got to do the Wrestle AM show at 3:15 a.m. I'll be doing it with Boom Booms and maybe Sammy. But stick around, like, comment, subscribe. Kocosports.net is the home for combat sports, and where it's okay to be a passionate fan. Thank you so much for watching live. Post live, thank you. Stay safe, stay well. We'll be catching your asses down the line.